The tension in the maternity ward had been brewing from the moment Alina was wheeled out of the delivery room, exhausted but glowing, her newborn daughter bundled gently in her arms. She had imagined this moment for months, the quiet joy, the soft introductions, the warmth of family gathering around the tiny life she had just brought into the world. She had not imagined her mother-in-law, Larissa, storming through the double doors like a general leading an invasion. Larissa's eyes flashed with judgment the second they landed on Alina. It wasn't the baby she focused on, it was Alina, pale, tired, and vulnerable, and somehow still a target for her resentment. "What are you doing here?" Larissa spat, as if Alina were an intruder rather than the woman who had just given birth to her granddaughter. "You shouldn't be lying here like a queen. Hospitals aren't hotels. Get dressed. We're leaving." Alina blinked at her, too stunned to respond. She clutched her baby instinctively, pulling her closer. The nurse frowned, but Larissa was the kind of woman who bulldozed through discomfort, her voice loud enough to drown out reason. Alina tried to speak, whispering that the doctor had strictly said she needed to rest. But Larissa waved her off with a coldness that cut like glass. "Rest? After what? One push and now you think you're fragile. Women in my day were stronger." Every word felt like an attack, an accusation, as though Alina had failed some invisible test of worthiness. Tears stung her eyes, but she stayed silent, knowing any protest would only feed Larissa's anger. The nurse stepped in, gently suggesting Larissa calm down, but Larissa shot her a glare that silenced even medical authority. She reached for Alina's arm, clearly intending to drag her out of bed if she had to. Alina recoiled, fear rising in her throat. She didn't know what to do, her husband wasn't answering his phone, and Larissa was unstoppable when she set her mind to something. For a moment, Alina felt like a cornered animal, clutching her child and praying for someone, anyone, to intervene. And then the door opened. A tall figure stepped inside, calm but commanding, and for a moment Larissa froze mid-gesture. The shock on her face was almost comical. She hadn't expected him, not here, not now, and certainly not watching her berate the woman who had just given birth to his granddaughter. It was Alina's father, Victor, a man Larissa had always underestimated, believing him too gentle, too quiet, too polite to ever oppose her. But not today. His voice carried an authority that filled the room. "Larissa, step away from her." Simple, firm, and impossible to ignore. Larissa's jaw tightened, her bravado slipping as Victor walked farther in, his gaze steady and cold. He moved to Alina's side, placing a reassuring hand on her shoulder. The tension in her chest loosened just a little, a breath of safety returning. Victor didn't raise his voice, he didn't need to. "You forget yourself. This is my daughter. She just brought life into the world, and you come here to harass her. To frighten her. To put your pride above the child she's holding." Each question hit Larissa like a stone. For once, she had no comeback. The room was silent except for the tiny sounds of the newborn shifting in Alina's arms. Larissa's face drained of color, her lips pressed into a thin line. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. The power she had wielded so ruthlessly melted in the presence of someone who finally stood against her. Victor turned to Alina. "You're not going anywhere. You're safe. And no one will intimidate you while I'm here." The relief that washed over her was overwhelming, warm, and stabilizing. For the first time since the ordeal began, she felt truly protected. And as Larissa slowly backed toward the door, speechless at last, Alina held her daughter close and allowed herself to breathe again. Larissa backed out of the room with stiff, jerky movements, as though her body refused to accept that she had been dismissed. The door clicked shut behind her, but the tension she left behind lingered like stale smoke. Alina sank back against her pillow, breathing shakily. Her daughter stirred, letting out a small, plaintive sound, and Alina instinctively adjusted her hold. Victor pulled a chair closer to the bed, his face softening the moment he looked at his granddaughter. "You did well," he murmured. "I'm proud of you." The words nearly broke her. After hours of labor, after emotional exhaustion, after Larissa's cruel intrusion, the simple kindness felt like a warm blanket being wrapped around her. Tears slipped down her cheeks, but these were different: relief, gratitude, release. "I thought she would take the baby," Alina whispered. "Or force me out of here." "She won't come near you again," Victor said firmly. "Not today. Not tomorrow. Not until your husband deals with her properly." His voice held a note of controlled anger, the kind that simmers beneath the surface rather than exploding. Alina had always known her father to be a calm man, the quiet type who avoided confrontation unless necessary. But now she saw a different side of him, protective, steady, unyielding. The nurse returned a moment later, her face still showing traces of the earlier chaos. "Is everything all right now?" she asked gently. "Yes," Victor answered before Alina could. "Thank you for your patience." The nurse smiled softly, then focused on Alina. "You and your baby are safe. If anything worries you, call us right away." With a reassuring squeeze to Alina's arm, she slipped out again, leaving father and daughter alone with the newborn. Alina finally exhaled fully. "She hates me," she said quietly. "No," Victor replied. "She hates the idea that she can't control everything. You're simply the closest target." Alina bit her lip. "But why today? Why like this? I just had her granddaughter, why can't she be happy about that?" Victor sighed deeply, leaning back in his chair. "Some people confuse love with ownership. Larissa has always believed that her son's life belongs to her. You disrupted that, just by being in it. And now that there's a child, she feels threatened again. She thinks she'll be replaced." His words were measured, not spoken with malice, but with understanding of a woman whose insecurities had curdled into cruelty. "But that's insane," Alina murmured. "Yes," Victor agreed. "But not uncommon." A soft knock interrupted the moment. The door opened just a few inches, and a hesitant voice asked, "Can I come in?" It was her husband, Andrei. Alina's breath caught. She didn't know whether to feel relief or anger. His absence during the confrontation had cut deep. But when he stepped inside, the worry etched into his face told her that he wasn't avoiding her, he simply hadn't known. "Dad called me," Andrei said, moving quickly to her side. "Are you okay? What happened?" Victor stood, giving his son-in-law room but not leaving entirely. Alina could see the storm brewing behind Andrei's eyes as she explained in halting words what Larissa had said, what she'd tried to do, how close she'd come to dragging her out of bed. Andrei's face darkened, jaw tightening, anger and guilt warring inside him. "She had no right," he said through clenched teeth. "I'm going to talk to her." "No," Victor interjected calmly. "You're going to do more than talk. You're going to set boundaries. Strong ones. For your wife. For your daughter." Andrei nodded slowly, as if absorbing the weight of the responsibility he'd been avoiding for years. "You're right," he whispered. Then he turned to Alina, touching her forehead with trembling fingers. "I'm so sorry you went through that alone. You're here now," she whispered back. He leaned over and kissed the baby's tiny head, and in that moment, for the first time since entering the maternity ward, he understood something profound. This wasn't just about becoming a father. It was about choosing his family, his new family, over old patterns, old fears, old loyalties. And outside the room, unseen but clearly felt, Larissa hovered in the hallway, realization slowly dawning that for the first time in years, the people she believed she controlled were finally slipping out of her grasp. Larissa lingered in the corridor like a shadow that refused to detach itself from the light. She paced back and forth, muttering under her breath, replaying Victor's reprimand again and again. Never in her life had anyone spoken to her that way, not her late husband, not her son, not anyone. And certainly not mild-mannered Victor, whom she had always dismissed as a polite, harmless man. The shock gnawed at her pride. Her hands were shaking, though she refused to acknowledge it. "They're ungrateful," she told herself. "They don't understand. I'm the only one who knows what's best." But deep inside, a discomfort stirred, an unsettling awareness that perhaps this time, she had crossed a line she could not easily retreat from. Inside the room, the atmosphere shifted from fear to fragile warmth. Alina rested her head against the pillow while Andrei gently rocked their daughter, marveling at her tiny fingers and soft breaths. The emotional storm brewing outside seemed distant now, muted by the sanctuary created within these four walls. Victor remained by the door, arms crossed, guarding the space like a sentinel. It was a silent message to anyone, specifically Larissa, who might think of intruding again. Andrei finally spoke, his voice steady but tense. "I should have been here sooner. I should have known she would try something." His guilt clung to him heavily. "Stop," Alina said softly. "You couldn't have known. You're here now. That's what matters." But Victor wasn't done. "You both need to understand something," he said quietly but firmly. "This moment, this child, this family you're building, it needs protection. And the person you need to protect it from right now is standing outside that door. Andrei's shoulders sagged. His entire life, he had been caught between fear of disappointing his mother and fear of facing the consequences of defying her. Larissa had raised him with love, yes, but also with control, with guilt, with invisible chains he never fully noticed until today. But seeing Alina in tears, watching her tremble from exhaustion and fear, something snapped in him. Not anger. Resolve. I'll talk to her, he said. But this time, there was no hesitation. No shrinking. Victor nodded. I'll be right here if you need me. Andrei placed the baby back in Alina's arms, kissed both their foreheads, and stepped out into the hallway. Larissa turned sharply, ready to reprimand him, ready to twist the narrative, ready to play the victim. But the look on his face froze her words in her throat. Mom, Andrei began, we need to talk. She tried to smile, to soften him. Of course, dear, I was just. No, he interrupted firmly. You don't get to pretend nothing happened. Her smile cracked. You terrified her, he continued. On the day she gave birth. You tried to pull her out of the bed. You treated her like she was nothing. I was only trying to. Stop. His voice cut through her excuses like a blade. You weren't helping. You were controlling. You've been controlling me, too, for years. But it ends today. Larissa blinked rapidly, her composure slipping. I'm your mother, she whispered, as though the word alone granted her unlimited power. And I'm a husband now, Andrei replied. And a father. My family comes first. Not your pride. Not your expectations. My wife and daughter. The words landed heavy and final. Larissa felt something collapse inside her, not anger this time, but something colder, starker. Fear. The fear of losing the person she'd always relied on to orbit her, the son who had always chosen her by default. Now he wasn't choosing by default anymore. He was choosing deliberately, and he was choosing someone else. She opened her mouth, but no apology came. Not because she didn't feel it somewhere deep beneath the layers of pride, but because she didn't know how to form the words. They felt foreign to her. I need you to leave, Andrei said quietly. Not forever. But today. Right now. Larissa stared at him, stunned. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. Her footsteps echoed down the corridor, each one heavier than the last. When Andrei returned to the room, Alina looked up anxiously. He closed the door gently behind him and sat beside her. It's done, he said. Alina reached for his hand, and as their fingers intertwined around their newborn daughter, a new kind of peace settled into the room, a peace earned, defended, and finally felt.